Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our third day of the DigitalEd Conference. We're glad to have you back with us. And today we are starting our keynote with Sheila MacNeill. We're welcoming Sheila MacNeill back to ATU Galway. She's been with us a few times delivering a few sessions. Sheila's from Glasgow. She's a digital learning consultant, but also an artist. And she's former chair of ALT, which is the Association for Learning Technology. She has 20 years of experience working with a range of universities. She has an interest in curriculum design, assessment and feedback, digital capabilities, and everything in between. So I'll leave it to you, Sheila.
Great, thanks, Jessica. And morning, everybody. Great to be here. And just before we get going, I just want to say a special thank you to Karina and all the team here at ATU for putting on this conference. It's been a great couple of days, and I know how much work it takes to put on an online conference and a face-to-face conference. So to do a hybrid conference, it's amazing. So thank you, and a special thank you to Jessica as well, because she's looked after myself and all my fellow keynotes and helped us make all our arrangements. So thank you all for that, and thank you all for being here again today. So what I want to do this morning is, it's Friday morning, it's a bit wet, and we've had quite a lot of information in the last couple of days, and we've seen some fantastic work. And thank you to all my fellow presenters who've done that, and the presenters later today who I know I'm going to show even more fantastic work. I want to take a bit of time this morning maybe to think about what's happened over the last couple of years and, you know, the experiences that we've all been through. To use that, it's going to be quite an interactive session. Hopefully it's going to be quite a discursive session. And yeah, let's have a chance to just take this time and just really talk about how we all are. But before we do that, I thought this morning, I just want to ask everyone, how are you today? How are you feeling? I don't know, this is for me, like this is my first face-to-face conference in over 2 years, so I'm feeling a bit tired, but quite inspired, actually, with everything that's been happening over the last couple of days. So if you could just go to the usual menti.com and put in the code there, and just share up to 3 words, and hopefully we'll get a nice word cloud to say how people are. I know for those of us that are lucky enough to be here in Galway, we had our conference dinner last night, which was lovely. So that might be impacting on how some people are feeling this morning, but no, but hopefully something will come up. A bit tired, yeah. Okay, hopeful. Oh, that's nice to see. Hopeful, lovely. Content. Oh, that's a nice word. That's nice to be content at this time on a Friday morning. No, a lot of people are content. Relieved? Yeah, everything's working. Yeah, I'm quite relieved when I see these words coming up here as well. Woolly. Oh, okay. Friday, yay. Engaged, good. Intrigued and engaged. That's another 2 good words as well. And happy, great. Lovely. I think everyone was very tired. Tired is the code word. Yeah. Burnt out, okay, yeah. Friday, I think, Friday feeling, yeah. Enthusiastic, yeah. We'll just give another minute or so and see if we get anything else there. But interesting, yeah. So a nice range of, I think, fairly positive emotions there coming through, which is good. You can keep doing that, and obviously I'll share the slides with everything there. But I think that's quite a nice kind of summary about how everyone's feeling on the last day of the conference. So I just want to talk about the here and now for a bit. So we're here. Some of you are here but online, and it's now. And as I said, this is the first time I've been to a face-to-face conference in over 2 years. It's the first time I've been on a plane for over 2 years. It's the first time I've been with people for like a concentrated amount of time. So it's been quite a different experience. The last couple of years, Sue and I have been here, but we've been with you online in the conference, which has been a different experience. So I think we're all just adjusting back to being in the here and now, and that's quite an adjustment. It's an adjustment for us, it's an adjustment for our students. And I think we all need to take a bit of time to actually be comfortable with that and figure out how we are going to be in the here and now in ways that are meaningful and work for us all. And this is, oh, sorry, am I moving about too much? So this is a quote from Stefan Collini from his book, the 2017 book, Speaking of Universities. And when I read that back, well, you know, that seems like a lifetime ago, doesn't it, 2017? This phrase really stuck out to me. We need to be able to articulate an understanding of what universities are for that is adequate for our time if we're able to decide what to do. Now, I think that phrase has even more resonance just now. And particularly maybe somewhere in ATU, you just become a new university, you are working out what that means, the different campuses, how you're going to work together, whether that's in your physical spaces and in your digital spaces as well. And obviously the DigEd project is a core part of that. But I think we do need to re-articulate what a university is for that is appropriate and not just adequate, but actually what is needed and necessary for our times now. I don't think we're quite post-COVID, but we are still living in a kind of a strange time. So it's not just about our responsibilities to our students in terms of what we need to do in learning and teaching. There's our research responsibilities, but there's also the wider responsibility that a university has in terms of its civic responsibility into the communities that it sits within. So I think there's a lot that we need to unpack related to this quote. But I don't know about you, but so as well as kind of understanding what we need to do in that kind of institutional sense, I think we all need to kind of reconfigure ourselves as well, because I don't know about you, I love this phrase, we're all a little schizophrenic. I've certainly felt a bit crazy, or I was going a bit insane over the last 2 years with things that have been happening. And you know, each of us has 3 people living inside of us. There's who we were, who we are, and who we will become. And the road to sanity is to recognise those identities in order to know who you are today. And again, I think that's quite apt for us in our context just now in learning and teaching and the support of learning and teaching. We have to not forget who we were a year ago or 2 years ago or even 3 years ago. And who we are today, because as I said, you know, we're still kind of readjusting to being back a bit on campus, a bit online, and thinking about who we're going to become. And it's quite difficult because, yeah, as I say, there's quite a lot of different pressures. So I think we have to accept there are lots of different things happening to us all just now. But what I really want to let us think about and get us to think about a bit more is kind of wider narratives about what has happened and what's happening with education and what people, not within education and out with the education, what they think the narrative has been over the last couple of years. Now, this is a quote from an article in The Guardian earlier this year, and it's actually about COVID narratives, about the political narratives about COVID, which is quite funny just now because there seem to be arbitrary dates and, you know, kind of like we don't have to wear masks, we don't have to worry so much about social distancing, we don't have to worry about, you know, hand sanitizing as much. And there's, you know, there's an arbitrary date and these things that became our norms have gone away. And I love this, that there's all big experiences have 2 realities. There's what really happened, and then there's the narrative, the story that we tell ourselves that has happened. And of the 2, apparently psychiatrists, psychologists say that it's the narrative, it's the stories, they're more important. So it doesn't actually really matter what actually happened, it's the stories that we tell each other. And creating these coherent stories is really important. And I think this is really important for us in education. We need to think about this. And I think just now, it's really important that we take some time to pause and reflect. And we really need to challenge some of the quite dominant narrative around about education, particularly as there's more of a focus to move back on campus. I really noticed this when we went into the first lockdown. In the media and the wider political narratives, not just about higher education, but education in general, but certainly for university education to be, air quotes, proper. It had to be on campus, it had to be a lecture, and it had to be written exams. And that was a proper and good educational experience. Online was second rate, it was difficult, nobody knew how to do it, which of course was completely wrong. You know, there were lots of people doing online learning and doing very successful online learning before lockdown. There was a huge evidence and research base that we could have drawn on, but that dominant narrative of good education being on campus and being face-to-face is still there. And we have a huge amount of experience. Everyone went online, everyone had a different experience, but there's a huge amount of experience and evidence now that we need to be producing and sharing back to the wider community so that people understand what a contemporary university education actually is, that educational experience is. Because even pre-pandemic, you know, a good university education was not just predicated on going to lots of lectures. It just wasn't. So we need to challenge that and those narratives. And we have really, you have all done amazing work to develop flexible, accessible and equitable approaches to learning. And we can't stop that. We must make sure that we keep developing that. But to do that, we need to take some time and we need to critique what has happened. We really need to have some serious discussions about what's worked, what hasn't, and why. And we need to build on that as well. And of course, we need to continue to work with our students as partners. And I think we've done a huge amount of really interesting student partnership work over the last 2 years, and we need to continue that and build on those good experiences as well. And if we wanted to have, you know, a theoretical framework for that, to look at this, we could look to critical pedagogy, and I'm sure you all know old Paolo over there, Paolo Freire. And I use this slide quite a lot, but, you know, he said, you know, we have to be critical, we have to have reflection and action directed at the structures that need to be transformed. And there's lots of things, there's lots of talk about transformation, but are we really transforming anything? As we transition back on campus, are we really learning the lessons and using some of the really transformational lessons that happened over lockdown? Or are we just going back to what was happened before? And if you are interested, I've put a link there to a little thought piece that myself and Professor Keith Smythe from the University of the Highlands and Islands and Bill Johnson from the University of Strathclyde, we wrote a little piece for the post-pandemic university, just about some of our thoughts about, you know, kind of taking a more critically informed approach to reviewing what's happened in over the last 2 years. But I'm not going to talk too much about that. But what I do want to do this morning, I want to get our kind of crystal ball, not to look forward, but to kind of look back so we can look forward. So I want to go back to 2021. Do you remember 2021? Yeah, I don't know about you, but the last 2 years I get confused when things happen. You know, all my kind of those standard markers of time went there. But it wasn't that long ago. But let's just see what has happened last year to this year. So Karina, I know on Wednesday morning, she mentioned this project, the Next Steps Moving Forward Together, that the National Forum did. I was very fortunate in that I worked with the Irish Universities Association, the IUA, to develop and produce their response to that. So I just want to share some of the experiences that the people I spoke to during that time came with. And there's some publications there. There's a short insight report that you can get from the National Forum website as well, if you were interested in that. So this was with the then 7 members of the IUA, the universities, and I think they're probably quite similar to the experiences that you will have here in ATU. So just to give you an overview of what I did, we wanted to make sure that we focused on the lived experience of a broad section of staff across the university. So I had 6 focus groups. So I spoke to directors of student services, IT directors, librarians, examination officers, heads of learning and teaching units, and a group of student interns that were part of the EDTL project. So I spoke to 42 participants, and we really wanted, again, to focus on that lived experience. So we had a very I suppose, broad framework of, you know, stop, start, continue. So what did you stop? What did you start? And what do you think you're going to continue? And we had discussions, and it was a fascinating insight. And, you know, again, the people that I spoke to were hugely generous with their time and with their openness about their experiences. But even at that time, there's so much had happened, it was quite difficult for them to remember what happened. So I think in some ways it was quite useful to have that opportunity to talk about it. Now, there were some common themes that came out of those groups, and these were the ones that came through. So in terms of leadership and rapid decision making, that was seen as really positive, that during the pandemic, decisions had to be made, and people were brought to the decision table that maybe weren't always there. So it felt like there was a real sense of we're in it together, people were working together. And there was the old adage, like trying to get anything happening in a university, it's a bit like trying to get an oil tanker to turn a corner. It takes 3 miles for it to do that. But that seemed to change, and that was seen as very positive. And then I did this in June last year, so there was quite a lot of uncertainty and concern around planning for the next academic session, because we weren't quite sure what was going to happen. Were people going to go back on campus? Were they not? At that point, I think we were just waiting for a ministerial announcement about that, So there was a lot of uncertainty about how you were going to plan and what was actually going to be happening. It was very difficult to plan with that uncertainty. Funding was a big issue. Funding is always a big issue. But during the pandemic, extra funds had been made available for quite a lot of things. So, for example, there was extra funding from the government for laptops for students that didn't have, technology, didn't have laptops, which was great to try and address a bit of that digital divide. Actually spending that money and using that effectively when everyone was flat out doing everything else was actually quite a challenge. So to have the mechanisms in place to really make the best of that was a challenge. Also, a lot of resources had to be made, a lot more resources had to be made available electronically, so more journal articles, chapters, that kind of thing. Money was found for that. There was a worry, would that be able to be sustained? So you might have been able to get electronic resources for all of your modules for that academic year. Would that be able to be sustained for the next 2-3 years? Big questions around funding in many places. Big issue, and I think this is still a big issue, is the whole issue of digital fatigue. And people were really tired, done a lot online. They were doing everything online. So we'd had a bit of, being able to see people, but most things were being done online. So that digital fatigue and staff well-being. And I think that's still a huge, huge issue. We have an exhausted workforce. People are still very tired. And the COVID numbers may be going down. But I just think that there's probably still quite a lot of people that are off with either stress or with other illnesses, and I think that's going to continue as well. So we have to really think about our staff. The fatigue is there, and it's real. Another issue for people that they were talking about was flexible working and how that had been really positive for a lot of people. But there was uncertainty whether or not that was going to be able to continue. And I think, again, that's not really been completely decided. So a lot of people, I think particularly support services, things that people had thought could never move online, had actually moved online and were very successfully online. So things like student counselling, a lot of different things, library work, so a lot of support workers, again, so academic support. And there was a worry there that if flexible working wasn't going to continue, then people would leave, so a lot of experience would be lost, and that kind of institutional knowledge would be lost. So that was a worry. Another positive theme that came out was the collaboration, and that kind of relates to the leadership and rapid decision making in a way. But there was a lot of collaboration between people within universities and across universities in Ireland as well. So people were sharing what they were doing, they were working together to do things just to support the students and get everything done. So those were the common themes. And in terms of, from that, I was able to draw out 4 areas where we felt that there could be, potential for further collaboration and work. And although this was a year ago, I think these still hold true. So the first area was that consolidation of experience, so that kind of reflection of what happened. And there was a need for some dedicated time for reflection and to harness the collective experiences that everyone had gone there. And there needs to be a way, to how can you support and find mechanisms to capture and share and consolidate experiences as we move forward. There was certainly a feeling that there was a need and a desire to extend student partnership working, because that had worked really well and wanted to do that. And again, going back to my earlier point about narratives, a creation of as we share and support these experiences, to capture these narratives and you know, share them. And that was over the past 15 months. Now that's kind of 24, 26 months. But also, in terms of this consolidation, there was maybe what came through was maybe a need to have more kind of a shared vocabulary, or maybe an update of some of the terminology that we're using. So things like Sue's model that she showed us on Wednesday about the different types, the difference between hybrid, high flex, blended, online, distance learning, so that everybody knows what we're talking about. So that when we're talking about either blended learning or hybrid learning, people actually know what that means in the context of their university. And again, that can spread that out to assessment types and student support provision. In terms of assessment, obviously that was a big thing that came through. A lot of changes to assessment. So there was a feeling that maybe there might be a need to kind of review the whole assessment life cycle. And I know that some universities had started that then, and I'm sure everyone's looking at it. But, you know, not just the design and the delivery, but thinking about the spaces that we have. Our assessments, are they going to be online? Are they going to be face-to-face? A lot of things that Philip was talking about yesterday, but also kind of having more wider discussions about the support around assessments as well, because we all know that any kind of assessment is a really emotional, stressful time for students, but it's also quite an emotional and stressful time when you're marking as well, which sometimes we forget. So going back to kind of thinking about well-being of staff, we need to remember that. Again, a consistency of use and understanding of assessment terms. So again, some of the things that Philip was talking about yesterday about, you know, authentic assessment, what does that actually mean? Those kind of things. And maybe I need to develop some newer standards or protocols or frameworks that covered the whole kind of life cycle of assessment, the administrative issues that need to be dealt with, the regulatory processes, and a need for more collaboration with professional bodies, particularly if we want to change assessments and move away from face-to-face assessments. There were quite a few issues and challenges with some professional bodies. So how do we bring professional bodies on board and make sure that they understand that actually as higher education institutions with, you know, the powers to grant degree power, power rewarding powers. Sorry, I didn't say that properly at all. But they understand that, and you can take them along with them so that they actually realise that actually doing something in an alternative way is fine. It's fine. There's a quality. They're happy with the quality of those assessments. And again, this was a particular hot topic this time last year, online proctoring. And again, Philip mentioned some of that, the balance between, you know, academic integrity and assessment security. But there had been sort of mixed experiences at that point with online proctoring. There were worries, concerns about the ethics of some of the systems. So there was certainly a feeling that there needed to be a lot more work done on that, and maybe there was the potential for some more collaboration in that area as well. One of the things that came out as well was maybe this kind of, if you like, a reimagining of digital and physical spaces, and a real kind of, we need to give more consideration about how we're using our spaces, when we're using our spaces, what kind of technology we need in our spaces, particularly if we're going to do things like this in a more hybrid way. Is the layout of this kind of a traditional lecture theatre? Does that make sense for hybrid learning? What's the cost of refitting rooms like this to do that? How do you develop practice around these kind of different forms of modes of delivery? So to do a hybrid session, it's really difficult to do it on your own, to have your attention online and in the room. Should we be thinking more about developing more team-based approaches and team teaching? That's quite a challenge as well, but we maybe need to be thinking about that. So maybe we need to be going back and thinking about learning design, actually how we plan our learning as well. And also within that, thinking about the spaces that we're using, when we're using physical spaces, when we're using online spaces, and make sure that we can do that appropriately for us and for our students. And to do that, we probably need some dedicated professional development time within workload allocation models, so that you actually get time where you can do these things and have the conversations with your peers, and develop these new models and then share them more broadly as well. So that was that. The other issue that came out there was about digital transformation and cybersecurity. And I think, you know, we can't really argue, there was a huge transformation. There was a cultural transformation in terms of how we deliver learning and teaching. But there were questions then about how to develop, some of the positive transformational changes. So we were quite lucky within the HE sector that we did have a relatively stable and robust infrastructure. A lot of universities had Teams. They might not have had Zoom, but they maybe bought Zoom. But we had conferencing facilities. We had VLEs. We had that infrastructure in place. Some people might not have used parts of that infrastructure before, and I think it obviously was a bit sad that it took a global pandemic for some people to actually log on to their VLE, but that's life. But how do you build on that? You know, so things like the effectiveness of online meetings. So, for example, when I was talking to the examinations group, they were saying that actually having exam boards online was really, really effective. You know, it was much easier to organise. Nobody had to travel. Lots of positives to that. During that point, there hadn't been a major kind of cyber security attack or anything gone wrong. I know that this year, in a university not too far from where we are just now, there was a bit of an issue with a system. But how do we kind of make sure that we have robust systems? How do we plan our existing infrastructure? This goes back to funding and investment. What does it mean to be a digital university now after 2 years of online? Now, those of you who know some of my work will know this is kind of an area close to my heart. And again, with Keith and Bill, we actually wrote a book called Conceptualising the Digital University, which we're revisiting now in terms of the pandemic. But what does that actually mean? I think we need to have a discussion about that. And within that, we need to recognise changing locations, changing roles. A lot of programme administrators, for example, have taken on a huge amount of work, you know, and they're doing things that they didn't do before in terms of maybe setting up online exams, running them, doing that. Everyone's digital capabilities went up a notch. So how do we recognise that? And how do we get everyone to go up another notch? Lots of things. And there was a feeling from the people that I spoke to that maybe there was a need for a more sectoral, kind of more national vision, particularly in terms of infrastructure, to help people prioritise investments and planning and maybe see if there were some ways that we could share the burden, if you like. And obviously, cybersecurity is an increasing issue. The more that we're doing in our everyday lives online, we need to be aware of that. And again, Phil mentioned some of the dangers of, I suppose, you know, from the online cheating systems, how they can blackmail students online, but there's other things we need to think about. And it's not just about the technology, it's about the culture. So how do we have these culturally informed decisions about security? Personally, I think cybersecurity is a really scary term. So is that the right term? But you know, that's just why I say I think it's accepted now. But I think we need to be having these conversations as well. Another piece of work that I did earlier this year, which I think is quite relevant to this as well, is I did sort of a short forward-facing review of the EDTL project, the Enhancing Digital Learning and Teaching in Irish Universities. So obviously you're very fortunate here in ATU that you've got the fantastic Digital Ed programme, which is embedded across the campuses. Other universities don't have that, but this project is trying to upskill staff and students there in terms of digital capabilities. And one of the things that I found, just talking to, again, just interviewing and doing some desk-based research, that these three elements of community, collaboration and capacity were really, really important. And I think they're important to everyone. So they were creating a community of people. They were collaborating. They were increasing capacity. So as we move forward, it's like, how do we extend and enhance those collaborative opportunities? How can we evaluate and evolve the capacity building that we've all done over the last 2 years? And how can we continue to engage and embed some of the knowledge that we've all learnt over the last couple of years as well? And obviously events like this are really important. But one of the things that struck me, and I think there's parallels with the work that's happening in digital ed as well, is that the project community itself became really quite close. They became quite a tight-knit network, and they gave each other a huge amount of informal CPD as well. So the fact that they knew each other, and when everyone was working, particularly in the first lockdown, when everyone was working from home, everyone was working flat out, trying to provide training materials and support for their colleagues. It was just nice to be able to have a Zoom call with people who were in the same situation as you, and you could say, we've tried this, or this is what we're trying to do, and they knew exactly what you were going through. And I think that's really, really important. And sometimes we forget about the need for those kind of informal opportunities just to share the experiences. And I think that's why conferences and the events like this are so important, because someone will say something, you're like, yep, that's exactly what's happening with me. So we need to be able to support that, because that's a really important part of community, and it's a really important part of developing digital capabilities. It's just understanding what works and what doesn't work, and just getting a little idea from someone saying, well, I tried this and this works, or we tried this but this didn't work because such and such thing, or whatever. But it's really, really important. So going back to 2021, when I was online, I asked people last year, because last year we were all a bit lonely and we were still all working from home, and I asked people what was the reality of their working life in 2020. So I thought this would be quite interesting to look back on. So people were saying it was chaotic, long hours spent at the desk, hard work, a bit rewarding there, slow. Online teaching has been soul destroying. Ouch. Challenging, a lot of challenging, a lot of stressful, it's quite intense. There's a lot of fatigue, but someone has enjoyed the flexibility, never busier and more engaged, but not engaged, if that makes sense. I think at the time that really did make sense. Not sure if it still makes as much sense now, but I certainly know what they meant there. And then just some more things, there's a bit of repeating there, but again at the bottom, lots of work, long hours, keeping head above water, and taking in some mouthfuls, work-life balance out the window, a roller coaster of emotions, very emotional time. Yeah, this is quite good. Realise the commute is a waste of time. I think that discussion's still going on. Isn't it? Yeah, it's been different, but some more positive things. But the last thing, multitasking at its best, living in warp time, but huge potential for the next chapter. But still a bit of confusion. So it was quite a mixed picture last year. So I thought I'd just after you've seen that, what is your reality now in 2022? So I'd just like you all just again to go to Menti and maybe just share a bit of. Are you still confused? Do you still think things are a bit chaotic? Is your work-life balance a bit better? Just be interesting to see. So I'll give everybody a little. So if you just go to menti.com and the code 728152. Are you as stressed? Are you more stressed? Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of people feel like that kind of just being with people again is a joy. I'm getting used to being with people, but I still feel a little bit anxious, I have to say. I've still got a few anxious. Yeah, great to be back on site. Yeah, it's nice to be back in familiar spaces, isn't it? Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Oh, that's nice. Someone's found a good rhythm with flexible working now. That's good. Scroll this down. Okay. Oh, more uncertain now than ever with working arrangements. Someone make a concrete decision. Some people have got a good balance. It's become a hard job, not so much joy. Oh no, we've lost joy. All right. Thanks. Trying to catch up on projects that were sidelined due to firefighting can feel more intimidating than the pandemic. Yeah, that's so interesting. Trying to find a new balance. Yeah, and that switching between face-to-face and online, yeah, it is tricky. We're all learning, I think. Yeah. Need more support from line managers. Maybe they need support as well, you know. Yeah. So it's more kind of about finding balance, isn't it? Not as social as I used to be, avoiding the canteen. Is that just because there's maybe not such a big range of food in the canteen as well? I've noticed that. Yeah, but I think we're all slightly wary about the spaces we feel comfortable in as well. Oh, really interesting. Sorry, I don't feel. Well, that's great. Working from home as a longer day, yeah. Learning I need to take responsibility to switch off from work. Yeah, I think we've all had problems doing that, haven't we? We need to make sure that we do that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. Thank you for that. Well, I'm sure there'll be a few more. And again, I'll share these slides with everybody. But yeah, so it seems to me from that yeah, it's about finding that balance. So it's maybe, but still a bit of uncertainty, a need for decisions. So we hope that everything is going to be moving back more to face, but we never know what's going to happen. We live in such crazy times, you know, who knows? I'm fully expecting, you know, some extraterrestrial landing to happen at one point, because I think that's the only crazy thing that hasn't happened in the last 2 years. But just thinking about your students, what's it like for them now? Because we asked that again last year. So this is what people at the conference last year said about the student experience. It's lonely and confusing, very tough, disengaged, chaotic. Yeah, you know, not coping, demotivating, lonely and frustrating. I think there's nods coming in through here. Disconnected from the college experience, you know. So quite difficult for students. Some other things, yeah. 3rd and 4th years like online, but there's no social interaction for the first years. Really difficult for first years, wasn't it? Coming in, doing everything online, not being able to meet people. Isolation, being overwhelmed. The students who do communicate, they tell me they hate online. Interesting. Stressful. Lack of motivation, lack of joy. Yeah, unrealistic experience, and no one asked for this. You know, that's not what a lot of students signed up for. Didn't sign up for that. So yeah, quite hard for students. A recognition that it was hard for students. They all have different realities. They're fed up. A lot of isolation. Yeah. But many have adapted well. So there was a bit of positive in there as well. But yeah, quite difficult for students last year. So has that changed? What's the reality like for students now? I mean, certainly it's been lovely to see students here over the last couple of days, and you can see they're doing more extracurricular things. They're playing sports, going to the gym, seeing each other, laughing and smiling. Yeah, so there's a lot of catch up, yeah. So that social catch up, getting to know each other in the real world as opposed to just online. Yeah, attendance is poor, yeah. Yeah, more pressure in work life. Yeah, I think that whole mental health issues, and that goes back to, I think, about flexibility and equitable access. You know, a lot of students, that some of the things that happened in terms of accessibility. I don't know how many presentations and students I've heard saying it was great. You know, suddenly we had the alternative formats. We didn't have to worry. It was easier for us to juggle things. Yeah, they're worried about that not being happening. That's still not happening. Oh, it's all coming through here. Oh, students engaged fantastically in the classroom seems to be come back. That's great. Still getting back into the swing of things. Yeah, recovering from a highly disruptive period of disruption to social and educational worlds. Lots of casualties, yeah. We've got quite a damaged community, haven't we? You know, our population. You know, we have to be aware of that. And I know there still is a focus on mental health and caring, but I think sometimes in our rush to get back to, I'm going to say normal behaviours. I don't think there's any such thing as normal anymore. Sometimes it's easy to forget these things, or we don't actually have the support mechanisms in place again. They love being back on campus but hate being in lecture halls. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess that goes back to that kind of, you know, why are we using spaces? What are we using spaces for? You know, if people have got used to having lecture recordings, you really got to make it worthwhile for students to come in person. So that, again, that goes back to that learning design planning, what we're doing to make the most of all of our time. So when we are face-to-face, we're doing things that are really worthwhile for us as educators and teachers, but also for our students as well. Yeah. Yeah, it's been wonderful to organise social events. Yeah, I think we'd all had enough of kind of the Zoom social things, haven't we? Yeah, it's not the same. Yeah. All right, students engaged fantastically, but no one spoke unless it was anonymous via Menti as well. Yeah, so kind of that's another cultural change from being maybe in an online session where you can switch off your camera and you don't have to be present, to actually being in a face-to-face situation as well. So lots of cultural adjustments as well. Yeah. So more pressure from work than before. Yeah, people are catching up. And again, you know, when we think about the current context that we're living in terms of, you know, the pressure on the standard of living, the price of everything is going up. You know, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be hard for us all. But for some students, if you're working through college, that's going to be extra pressure on you as well. Yeah, really interesting. So I think we're going through a period we're not back to normal by any kind of stretch of the imagination. But we've all got to work together to find out how we actually make the best of our reality in 2021. So I'll just see if there's any more things in there. Yeah, well, that's interesting. Digital tools have helped with engagement in the classroom. Yeah, so how do we keep that engagement, and how do we broaden our notions of what classroom engagement actually is? If we're using, you know, if we are going to use more hybrid or high flex approaches, what does engagement, what does equitable access and engagement mean in those situations? And this is a really interesting experience for me, being in this kind of hybrid presentation, because I think there are far more people online, and people online are having quite a different experience than the people here as well. So being able to judge that and understand that and get that balance and make sure that it is equitable, we all got to learn with that. So thanks for that. Great comments coming through. And again, I will share that. I think it's just interesting just to take a bit of time and reflect on these things. So just kind of as we come sort of towards the end of this presentation, I think we've all got into habits over the last couple of years. You know, we've made habits and we've broken them, but there are some habits, particularly around our learning and teaching practice, that we maybe want to keep, or maybe we've decided we're going to break that. We're never going to go back to doing an online lecture. We're all going to do things face to face. So I want to take a couple of minutes and ask you about your habits. So again, in Menti, I wonder if you could just maybe share one habit that you're either going to make, you're going to break, or you've broken, or you're wanting to develop. So last night we were talking about this, and I don't know, I remember like back in the first lockdown, everyone was going for a walk, a daily walk, and everyone said how much better they felt for going for that bit of exercise every day. Do you still do that? I know I don't do it as regularly as I did, but during the first lockdown, I made a point, partly because it was the only thing we could do, but it was really good for us. So why aren't we still doing that? Why have I broken that habit? I maybe need to make a habit about maybe exploring some things, or are there some things you want to do within your teaching, or you want to say? So I'm just quite interested in to see what habits you want to make and break. And if you maybe put like hashtag make, break, or develop, that might help us just distinguish the responses. Or maybe there's some things you've learned or heard about over the past couple of days at the conference, and you think, actually, I'm going to try that. So what are you going to try based on what you've heard of in the conference? Or is it you're just going to stop drinking as much coffee and eating as many biscuits? I'm going to try and do that every week, but it never works. That's a good one. I'm no longer going to work 60 plus hours. Yeah. Excellent. Oh, that's good. Someone wants to try Menti. Yeah. Yeah, be more sociable. Yeah. I think slowing down, I think that's a really good habit to make. Oh, someone's going to break high flex teaching. Yeah, I think there's going to be lots of debates over the coming years about that. Yeah, not have lunch at the desk. Yep. 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 Building time for reflection. Yeah. Yeah, really interesting. This is all about people have a lot of self-care here, not working as much, looking after yourself, walking, talking to people, making time for a break. Run every day. Yeah, join a club. Make time for writing. Yeah, it's been difficult to get everything in, hasn't it? Yeah. Be in the now. Yeah, make time to be in the now. Try and stop and, just reflect on what that means. Switch off at 5 p.m. Try to be more open to new stuff. Yeah. Catch up with colleagues in person. Take up reading again. Yeah, that's a nice habit. Yeah. Yeah, time allocation. Yeah. Interesting. Make education more fun for students. Yeah, how can we engage our students? And if we did that, maybe we'll find the joy again. Let's find the joy. Any more? Yeah. Stop reading emails at the weekend. That's so difficult, isn't it, when it's on your phone? so difficult. Yeah. Yeah, great. Well, great. Well, I hope that this has made you think, and that actually maybe you do it. Maybe if you do make it a complete habit, maybe next week you might make some time to do some of these things, because if you're anything like me, I know it's very difficult to develop a habit, but we want to try and do that. And I think if we do want to change and if we want to evolve, it's about developing habits and getting into the habit of doing things and sharing those habits with people as well. So thanks for that. And again, I'll share these slides with all the responses as well. Interesting to look at. So what next? So I think as we move forward, we have to keep coming to events like this. We have to keep sharing what we're doing with each other and being honest about what's working and what's not working. And to make time for some honest, critically informed discussions. So whilst I appreciate that we all need to just have a bit of time where we can just have a bit of a blah, and let things out, we actually need to take that and move forward in a constructive way. So how can we actually do this constructively to help our students, to help ourselves, to develop those new habits that we will need to have, those engaging, joyful learning experiences? Because if our students are engaged, we're going to get a lot more pleasure from our jobs and job satisfaction as well. But the other thing I think we have to be really aware of is not to succumb to what I'm calling pandemic amnesia. So I think particularly in sort of wider political circles, there's definitely this, to me, this kind of almost impression that that didn't happen. The pandemic, it's over and done with. We don't talk about that now. We're just moving on, and we're going to get back on campus and everything's going to get back to normal, and we're going to forget about what actually happened. Going back to that first point about the lived realities, the narratives, there's what actually happened and the stories that people tell. We have to make sure that we have the stories to tell about what happened in the pandemic and how that is influencing learning and teaching practice in the now and in the future. So we can't succumb to that, and we have to share our stories, and this is a great place to do it, but we need to make that time. So on that point, I think I will leave you. Hopefully this has given you some time to reflect and think about your habits and what you want to do next. But I'm open for questions, and I'll have a look at the chat and see what discussions are there. But thank you for your interaction and your sharing this morning. Right.
Thanks very much, Sheila. Sorry, now I missed the very beginning. I was cutting the raid.
It was the best bit. We can't tell you what happened because it was so good.
And thanks, Jessica. I know opened everything. But it's such an interesting presentation. I did see a little bit when I arrived in my office, so I was then running down the corridor. But I suppose, is there questions coming through? I have a couple of questions, but maybe there's
maybe more chat actually.
Yeah, and there might be people here in the room that want to ask some questions to Sheila. Is there questions online first of all, Jessica?
Comments.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The statement there, don't succumb to pandemic amnesia. Great statement. Really is.
Yeah.
So many people have already forgotten all of the stuff that we said. We never forget. We won't change. We won't.
Yeah. Well, I think so much has happened. Everyone has gone through so much in the past 2.5 years, and things are still changing. That, I mean, I can't remember what I did. Well, I can remember everything that happened last night. We didn't have too much to drink at all. But you know, there are times that I can't remember maybe what I did last week because there's just been so many things happening. And I get mixed up with lockdowns, what happened when, and you know, because our traditional markers of time went out the window. Yeah. So it's difficult to do that, but we have to make the time. We can't forget. So much happened, and we all learned so much, positive and negative.
Yeah, it's the learnings.
Yeah.
And is there questions here from the room? Is there anybody that has particular questions? No? I was going to ask you about, you know, this whole idea of hybrid, and you know, a lot of people are talking about high flex now, and our students are looking for a lot of options and choices. It's a bit of an a la carte menu.
Yeah.
So maybe what's your view on that? And do we really have to change everything and flip everything on its head? Or
I don't know. I think we have to make time to have a serious discussion about it, which is not a cop-out answer, but it sounds like. I don't think we actually understand what hybrid and high flex are. So going back to Sue's model, we need to have conversations across the institution with students, with staff, with senior management, with administrative services as well. We need to understand and have a collective understanding about what that means in each of our contexts, because it will be slightly different depending on what institution you're in. We have to have really serious conversations about the kind of technology that we would need to actually have that mode of delivery and make that effective. Then we need to think about the staff development. You know, as we were saying there, it's really difficult to have one member of staff doing a hybrid or a high flex teaching situation. So how can we have more team approaches to teaching? How can we use that as actually a really good collaborative CPD opportunity as well? When we are providing staff development, how many of our online staff development courses are being run in hybrid or high flex ways? Because we need to have our staff having the student experience of hybrid, high flex as well. So there's a huge thing. So it might, whilst I can see that it might appear a really easy answer because it gives students flexibility, it's not. Nothing in life is ever simple. And we need to talk to the students and get more evaluation about what they find works. Yeah. We need to work with our students saying, well, what actually really engages everyone, whether you're in the room or whether you're online. So I think it's the kind of the next stage of our development. And we need to be sharing things, and sharing quite a little often, I think, is going to be useful as well. So we all learn and kind of, well, we tried this, that didn't work, this is how we adapted it. But we're not going to be able to have, you know, the perfect model for September, I don't think.
But I think you've made a really good point there about the consultation process. We did a lot of checking in with our students during the pandemic to see how they were doing. We need to go back now and consult once again in relation to learning and engagement and the lessons learned, and just like what you're saying, what's their understanding of high flex or hybrid, and but also our colleagues educating across the institute or across our new university, what's their And that maybe perhaps that'll feed into our whole plans for our LTA strategy for
absolutely. I think
university.
So. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks, Sheila. The other thing is around assessment strategies. Now, you might have touched on that at the beginning, but, you know, with Phil yesterday and the whole area of academic integrity and the e-cheating, and it's quite scary. And I know you were close to what was happening in the UK. Any particular lessons learned? I like the idea of the whole e-portfolio, and that leads into our discussion today with lots of cases, but maybe we should be moving towards that integrated approach. It seems Phil was certainly supporting the e-portfolio element where you have that opportunity to put in lots of elements and experiences over the 4 years of your program.
Definitely. I think it goes back to those narratives, those kind of political narratives about education and assessment. And there is just this overwhelming sense that to have a proper educational experience, you have to have an exam. You have to have had that experience of having an exam. Now, I don't know about you, I can't remember the last time I had an exam. It was quite a while ago, and I think I'm doing okay without having done an exam. In fact, I don't know if I could actually pass an exam if I had to sit in a hall and write something. Nobody could read my writing. So I think we have to be a bit more realistic, and we as educators have to inform, we have to be better at getting our stories out there about why a portfolio approach is better, about why it empowers students to actually take to a potential employer examples of their work, instead of a grade. Oh, I got an A in computing, but here's some code. This is the thing that I built. You know, we need to be encouraging that and let students understand and parents understand that actually, you know what, your kids might not have done exams for 2 years. It's okay.
Yes.
That's not going to, that they will not be bad people, they will not be worse people. It's all okay. They can still have fulfilling lives. They can still be fulfilled educationally. They can have a really rich educational experience. So I think it's about doing that. And yes, just making that more commonplace and working more with professional bodies. But a lot of professional bodies want that anyway. They want that portfolio of evidence. So I think it's about just being more honest about those kind of things and not just succumbing to political, the outside capital P political pressure, because education and exams are very highly political, but it's not just about getting so many kids get an A or whatever. It should be much more holistic. And I think, again, pandemic amnesia, one of the things about the pandemics, we're all going to change, we're all going to care, we're all going to go grow vegetables, it's all going to be lovely, isn't it? And now we've got a bloody war, and, we're thinking about nuclear destruction, inflation's going, and we have to get back to normal and busy. So, again, we need to maybe just take time when we can to take a step back and be confident enough to do it.
No, and I'm glad you're making that point, and the well-being has come really into play now.
Yeah,
we
definitely.
need to think about that a lot more
for
ourselves and for our students.
Absolutely. Because if you're all burnt out, that's not going to help your students.
No, not at all. No, that's brilliant. Thanks, Sheila. And is there any final questions, or are we doing okay for time, Jessica?
We have about 2 minutes. Just to say, somebody online, we'd like to coach you and keep you a date.
All right.
She's a regular visitor.
Yes.
Happy to do that.
Yeah, we were chatting about this yesterday, about creating some sort of a visiting fellowship scheme for our lovely educator partners that come and visit us every year. So we'll have to look into that. But thanks again, Sheila. Lots of food for thought.
Yeah, and thanks everyone for joining in today.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's great. Thanks a million.